And so Karen, we don't have an official agenda or anything like that. This is just an informal drop-in. So
Good.
our agenda is set by you.
Uh-oh.
So what did you want to chat about?
When is the Palace app going to be available? First of all.
Carissa.
Yes, so we are tentatively targeting the 1st of December. So
Okay.
we have work to migrate all of the libraries, kind of the internal infrastructure that we're running, the software. We've upgraded and updated, so we need to transfer all of your configurations that we had on now outdated software onto new infrastructure, and that work's going to start. Tara and I will hopefully start that the beginning of October.
Okay.
We're going to, once we get all of the kind of migrations in place for libraries, so their ILS configurations and their collection configurations migrated, Tara and I and Heather are going to do testing to make sure everything looks and works as expected. We'll be reaching out to libraries at that point, library staff as well, and let you know that you can test your library if you have time and interest. I mean, certainly we're going to do it, but if you'd like to do that as well. And then we're hoping to turn everybody on in Palace at the beginning of December.
Okay.
So as Tara and I start to move libraries, their configurations over, we will be able to confidently say what the timeline is, like what date in December and when you'll be able to test. We're waiting for our colleagues in the technical team to kind of spin up the new servers that we need to configure. But that's the timeline we're working on right now.
Okay, and so to get it on the website and stuff, I'll have all that information and I'll have some graphics and all of that.
Yes,
Yeah,
Heather, you can talk
on the graphics, and we'll have like newsletter text and social media text you can just copy and share, and we'll have images and all the descriptive text and user guides and things like that. Is there anything special that you would like?
I just make a button for, especially when it's a new service, for the homepage, and then also we have electronic resources page.
Sure.
And that way the patron can just link right into the service. So
perfect. Yeah, we'll have all of that stuff too.
Okay.
Awesome.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about it?
About the content, what exactly is going to be in it? I don't know if we're going to have the DP, with the digital public library stuff and all of that in the New York. Do we know what all the content is going to be?
So it'll be all of the same as what
Okay.
it was. Your configurations won't change. So I don't
Okay.
remember off the top of my head your specific library's configs, but I assume you have Overdrive and likely an Overdrive Advantage collection.
We do, and Hoopla.
We don't integrate with Hoopla yet.
With Hoopla yet? Okay,
Not
because
yet.
that was going to be coming with the other. Okay.
Yep. We are working on a roadmap that we can share publicly. So as soon as that's available, we'll share it with all of our libraries as well. And then Brad can speak to, there is a collection, multiple collections from the state library that they source from the DPLA, from Baker and Taylor, and from BiblioBoard. The RB Digital collection that the state library used to source is currently being migrated to DPLA, and then will be available to all of you as well. So that work's underway. And then there's the DPLA Open Bookshelf collection, which will be integrated. So it's all the same collections will be configured in Palace as they were before.
Okay, so patrons will have access to the Project Gutenberg titles then through?
They're part of the DPLA Open Bookshelf.
Okay, great, because I know we have patrons that that's primarily what they use it for, to be able to download those titles. Okay, great.
Yeah. And I know our colleagues in the DPLA are working to add even more open content to the bookshelf. So I think there's about 11,000 titles right now. And Micah May, who's leading that initiative at DPLA, mentioned on a call yesterday that he's queuing up several hundred, close to 1,000 more titles, and it's a strategic initiative of the Digital Public Library of America to continue to add open content to that collection.
Okay.
So as they do that, it'll just automatically flow into your library in the Palace app as DPLA adds that content. There's no additional action you'll need to take. It'll just be in the Palace app.
Okay, good. At the right now, patrons can still use Simply E, or that's now closed out?
That's a good question. One second, let me just check a list that I have. Yes, yes. Your library
Mhm.
patrons can still access
Access it,
Weston
okay.
Public Library
Mhm.
in Simply E. So what will happen for your library? So there were some Connecticut libraries that didn't have active patrons using it, so we removed them from the Simply E app. So that's what I needed to check to make sure your library was still in there. In part of the transition of launching Palace, we'll work with you likely in mid, we'll have to take into consideration the Thanksgiving holiday, but
Right.
mid to late November,
Okay.
in ensuring that there's a transition. We'll take your library out of Simply E and launch it in Palace. So there'll be a kind of a transition phase, but we'll help coordinate the kind of timing around that for you. We can also schedule a bit of overlap where your library is in Simply E and in Palace kind of simultaneously to give your patrons some time to transition
Oh,
over to
good.
using Palace.
Okay, I know, especially this one woman who she was having trouble with Simply E, and well, first she didn't tell me what service she was using, and then we figured it out. She was doing Simply E, and she was having trouble, and I said, well, it's going to be going away.
That's right.
So, okay, I can let her know.
Yes. Yep.
Good. I'm trying to think if I had any other questions for you. And my main concern was for the launch date too. That was, and I had, am I right? The whatever patrons have checked out, they'll still be able to finish, but their holds won't cross over, right?
Their holds won't, and if they're actively reading something, it won't transition because it's an entirely new app, not just in like an
Right.
update.
Okay.
So
All
they
right.
will, unfortunately, there isn't a way for us to like replace the Simply app on someone's individual device.
Right.
Patrons will have to go to the App Store, search for the Palace Project, and
Yep.
download the new app. So, and then they'll have to re-enter their barcode and PIN, and so they will lose their holds as well as what they're reading. So that's where the coordination with you and making sure we have enough time, overlap time between when we pull your library out of Simply and launch it in Palace, so that patrons can finish up reading or listening to whatever they have, and then transition over to Palace.
Okay, and I'll have time to play with the app before we launch it for our
Yes.
patrons?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Good. And that way we can train staff.
Yep. It should, and it will look relatively similar and operate similar. It's built on the same exact code base as Simply. We are making it look a little bit more polished. That's our hope for this release. So there'll be new icons, but the navigation and how you like log in with your barcode and PIN, if you have a PIN, how you check things out, like all of the kind of structure will remain the same, but we're working on just making it a kind of a much more kind of polished and consistent across iOS and Android in this first release.
Okay, great.
What are the dates on that?
For our public libraries, and Nancy, I believe you're at NYU.
Yes.
So the timeframes for the academics are kind of still being worked out. For public libraries, we're working to transition configurations and move them into Palace at the beginning of December. My colleague, James English, is working on the transition plan for our academic libraries. So he can speak to that time frame.
Has anyone started any marketing to change the just to get the word out?
So are you referencing the individual libraries to their patrons, or generally what Lyrasis is doing?
To the libraries.
So we haven't yet. For our public libraries, we are just now developing a plan to transition their configurations. So Lyrasis has improved the baseline software that we're running, and that will require us to spin up new servers and migrate configurations. So we're just now starting that work. In tandem to that, our technical team is actively testing the mobile apps as well. So they're still kind of in beta phase. And so because we're still in early stages, we haven't done any work with our public library colleagues to start promoting to patrons. We feel like it's a little bit too early for that quite yet. But that, based on our timeline, our ideal timeline of migrating all the public libraries starting in October, will likely happen kind of mid-November, I would say, for the transition. We're targeting the beginning of December for the public libraries.
And I think doing things much more than a month to 6 weeks out is probably a little bit much, because people forget by that point. So we're going to start having a series that'll go out to people, a marketing series, that we can start like 4 weeks in advance, just telling people what's coming and, that they're going to have to finish up what they're doing. But so we're aiming for like a month before.
A discard on the second copy, and I put it out for downstairs for the public. Oh, okay.
Well, did that answer your question, Nancy?
Yes, that's very helpful.
Great. Hi, Peggy, welcome. Peggy, you just joined, and we don't have any kind of formal agenda for this call. So we were just going over some dates and some questions people had around marketing materials and dates around the Palace launch. So I think we're just kind of wrapping up those questions. We'd love to know what you wanted to chat about, why you're here.
Quickly in the meantime, I have a question related to what Karen was asking. Karen, you said you had a patron that was really interested in the open bookshelf content.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just have a question about whether that content will continue to be available in Simply E, in the Simply E collection, which is you can basically download the app now and you don't have to have a library card. You can access that content just by choosing that as your library, right?
I believe so, yes. I don't know. The New York Public Library controls the Simply E app, and will be the ones who make the decision on how long that library or that collection persists in the app. I believe it's still there, and I believe that they're committed to making that available, but that's not something that Lyrasis controls or can commit that it'll be there forever. But I believe the New York Public Library does plan to continue to keep that collection available in the app.
So, obviously we want patrons to use the resources that we provide, but also, speaking as a former reference librarian, we like to make patrons happy. So Karen, if your patron is still interested in that content, I would just consider that as at least one option.
Okay.
During the interim, once we roll over, obviously all that content will be available in Palace.
Right.
But just to make a patron happy, sometimes it's good just to say, hey, keep that Simply E app, choose the Simply E collection as your library, and you should be able to access that content.
Great, thank you.
I know it's one patron, so it's not the mass communications you'll be doing to your
Right.
Your patrons. So
Good, thank you, Brad.
You're welcome.
Yes, I joined the meeting late. So has a date been given for the Palace app to be launched?
Yeah, so we're targeting transitioning all of our public libraries into Palace at the beginning of December. We're going to start migrating all of the configurations here in October. We'll reach out to libraries as we're doing that. Tara, Heather, and myself are going to manage the configuration migration. So there's a lot of kind of hand coding that we need to do. We're going to test your library to make sure it works as we would expect in the Palace app. And then we'll reach out to you. And if you have time and interest in testing your library in Palace, we'll give you that opportunity. We're not expecting libraries to do that. That's why we'll be doing the testing as well. We are, again, tentatively targeting mid-November-ish. We got to work around, of course, the Thanksgiving holiday to make that available as an option to you and your staff to get familiar with Palace, and then essentially light you up or make you available, flip the switch, so to speak, for your library and Palace the beginning of December. Our technical colleagues are just spinning up the servers that Tara and Heather and I need to configure next week. So as soon as they give us our servers and we can start our work, then we'll reach out because we'll be more confident in our timeline that we can commit to these particular dates, and then we can put actual dates on the calendar once we have the servers in hand and we can actually get to work. I'll feel more confident that we can put dates on the calendar for you. So we'll definitely be reaching out and letting you know more. But for right now, we're targeting the beginning of December for our public libraries.
So at what time do you anticipate that Simply E will go away, be unavailable?
Yeah.
Same time?
So for Karen and Peggy, Weston, and you're at New Milford, right, Peggy?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I thought I had that right. So we're hoping that we can do a couple week transition phase for you. So at the beginning of December, your library will be live in Palace and it'll still be available in Simply E for your patrons. So they have a chance to finish up reading or listening to whatever they have. Their loans and their holds will not transition to Palace because it's an entirely new app. So we're hoping we'll give like a 2-week kind of transition phase to patrons so they can move and download the new app. We have a firm cutoff date of December 31st. Your library will no longer be in Simply E, but we're hoping that kind of in the first couple of weeks of December, we can help you communicate to your patrons, have them transition over to Palace. And, by the end of December, you wouldn't have any patrons actively using Simply E is our goal, to kind of build some buffer in there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so once again, I have another follow-up if I could. So one of the things that we assume to begin with is that the back end or Library Simplified would remain the same. So a couple questions I have about that I think libraries will be interested in. One, there will be upgrades made and changes. So it will be a new looking back end, but it's going to have major improvements built into it. So it's an improvement of what we had, but the configuration logins, so the logins that the different public libraries have, that will still remain the same?
Yes and no. The best answer ever, I know. So the URLs will be changing, which will be communicating to libraries. But if you have an log into your circulation manager right now, your credentials will stay the same. It's just the URL is going to change. In the beginning, it's going to look exactly the same. The improvements that have been made are, I always facetiously say, software development improvements. Like, they're not sexy. It's an upgrade to the software, the code, coding language that's used by the circulation manager. It's called Python, if you're familiar. Transitioned from 2 to 3, which means nothing to me, but the software developers assure me that it's critical to stay on the most latest release so that they can build feature improvements. They can't do that in an old programming language. So our colleagues have done that. They've also updated the database. So again, typically that means nothing to me. I'm not a software developer, but the impact of updating the database is that the Circ Manager and the app should be faster. So when you click on things or load the catalog, it should load more quickly because it's on a newer version of the database software. It's called Postgres is the name. So those are the kind of infrastructure types of improvements our colleagues have made, which will build a foundation so that they can add more features and functionality for us and for you next year into the future much more easily. So right now, kind of housekeeping improvements, and then that'll allow us to build and add additional functionality much more quickly in the future.
That's great. Thank you.
I have a question about statistics. I have gone into the circulation manager and looked at the statistics, and I don't find it intuitive at all. I don't know if that's, just because I don't understand it, but I don't seem to be able to find a clean look at our libraries, logins, accesses, what people are looking at, and what they're downloading and such. Is that going to be changing at all?
It is something that we've targeted for an improvement. So there's nothing on the roadmap that I can point to concretely yet. But Tara and Heather and I are advocating with our technical team that is something that drastically needs improvement. So it's not just you, Peggy. Every single library has mentioned that they need improved statistics. And all of those infrastructure housekeeping changes that I just mentioned to the CERC manager that, quite frankly, I don't care about, I do care about, because that's going to enable our development colleagues to then make improvements to statistics in the future. I think Tara and I in particular sit on weekly calls with our technical colleagues and mention statistics every single week. So they hear us. And so I'm hopeful that the beginning part of next year, we will have the ability to start making changes and improvements to the statistics. In the meantime, the project team has been staffing up. So we've been focusing on hiring new developers, new implementation people, so that we can more quickly be able to improve the software. We're kind of just building up the team right now, so we haven't been able to dedicate time to the statistics piece, but absolutely, that is a kind of critical piece that we've heard from libraries across the board that needs improvement.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Peggy, a question for you. Have you been able to get your statistics for last fiscal year put together?
No, because I've had difficulty with it. I could probably go in and access them, but I really haven't been able to find a format where I can put in like comparisons month to month or something like that. So like I say, I feel just lost as to, what am I looking at?
So one of the things I've done for a few libraries that have requested it is for last fiscal year, I put together basically our RB digital numbers and then the numbers that were in Simply E. And I've tried to kind of put a little explanatory report together for those libraries so that they could at least put the content that they need to for the state report. And that's often the biggest thing. So if you'd like me to do that for you, I can do that. I'll send it to you. And then if you have questions, we can either do a Zoom or a phone call to follow up.
Oh, that would be great, Brad. Yeah, that
Okay.
would really be helpful.
I'll take care of that. Probably by the end of the day tomorrow, I'll have something to you.
Can you do
Okay,
that
great.
for Weston too?
I sure can.
Great, thank you, Brad.
Absolutely. No problem.
Thank you.
Can I ask, while I have you here, Peggy, and anyone else that wants to chime in, what are the most important statistics you would like to see captured in the new reporting? What would like your ultimate statistic report look like?
Primarily logins. A breakdown of the types of accesses by genre or by age within the population.
Okay, and then maybe like materials, like ebook versus audiobook.
Yes, something like that. Yes.
Great, thank you. That's good, because I can add that to our requested features, as we're building that out. It's nice to have that feedback of what would be most useful for you.
Okay, thank you.
And I know from some libraries that have reached out to me at different times, obviously we want, checkouts of ebook, checkout of e-audio. The number of holds on a title is sometimes helpful, and that's for collection development purposes. It's something that I definitely have used in the past to I see that there's 75 holds on Obama, Michelle Obama's book of Becoming, that type of thing. So I have to buy some more copies of this. And then also, when an item times out, we no longer have access to it, it can help you make a decision whether you buy that again or not. So I think for the collection development piece, that type of information can be helpful as well. And I'm sure I've said that probably multiple times to you already, but
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
just to maybe brainstorm, Karen and Nancy, if you have any other ideas about what you might like to see, that would be great to hear too.
Mhm.
Well, the academics use the counter stats format. And while the specs are, 500-page long, I don't know if there's just even the most simplest, because we pull in all of our stats into counter reports, and pretty much anything that's out of counter, we don't look at, unfortunately. I mean, we can't look at across the board. So I'd be happy to work with you guys on just like a base level minimal, just title count, just it's set up in a way. I don't know if the publics have a similar standard for statistical reporting. That's too bad.
Not that I am aware of. I feel like that would be, if you are game, Nancy, that would be a wonderful pilot project. Just kind of the top 5 to 10 statistics that in the kind of counter protocol would make the most sense for public libraries. I think that could really inform the dashboard that we're hopefully creating for our public library colleagues.
Yeah.
As Heather noted, our sessions are informal. We just hang out. We talk about random things if there are no other work-related topics.
I guess in my communications internally, I'm struggling with like what to call, it, because Simply E was so easy. So we just say Palace. You say the Palace app, and then the back end we used to say Library Simplified. So then I say the back end of Palace. So I don't know if there's some alignment to how you guys are calling the similar parts.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the team hired a marketing and branding firm. So they came up with the recommendations. So I'll share their recommendations with you. So yes, it is the Palace app, Palace mobile app. The app itself is just called Palace. The overall everything is the Palace project. So the team, all the pieces of technology, the back end or the library simplified portion of the system, also called the circulation manager, and that's the web back end that we give you access to. So that's what you log into, so you can see all your configurations. The branding firm, I think, recommended calling it the Palace Manager. I call it the admin portal because I feel like there's so many other terms that it could be called. But I think the recommendation from the branding firm is called the Palace Manager. And so everything in their branding guidelines was Palace and then something, Palace Manager. The Digital Public Library of America's exchange is now going to be called the Palace Marketplace. The name changes, it's still exactly the same thing. It's where you can buy content from the Digital Public Library of America. It's where their licensed materials live. The DPLA open bookshelf continues to be the same. It gets a new name, the Palace Bookshelf. But again, the content, the collection is still exactly the same. The priorities to add more content, open content is still persisting at the Digital Public Library of America. So everything gets a rebrand, but it's all the same kind of components that you had and used before.
Thanks, that's helpful.
I hope it is. I mean, I'm certainly open to recommendations for more coherent naming structures and conventions if there's just way too many things called Palace being thrown at you.
Well, is the circulation manager, I mean, we're allowed to use that term, I guess. Yeah.
It's
So
never,
yeah, so we'll just call it this Palace Circulation Manager.
yeah,
I think
that
Palace
term's
Manager
never,
is probably, yeah.
it's never going to go away. Once a piece of software gets a name, I think it just sticks.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, don't, for those of you who have joined, don't feel a need to stick around for the full hour. We have folks who come and go as they have time through our hour slot. I mean, you're more than welcome to stay on with us, but don't feel obligated to if you need to drop off and do other things. But if there are any other questions, we're happy to chat through them as well.
You answered all my questions. I'm glad I got on early. So I will go out to the desk and get my shift in. But thank you very much. It's been very helpful.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Karen.
Karen.
Good to
Okay.
see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I think I'll do the same. You did answer my questions, and I'm anxious to see the new app in progress.
Yeah, we will
Okay.
definitely share with you, Peggy. Thanks so much. And thank you for being one of the very earliest libraries that I've worked with, and your continued support. It means a bunch. I'm sending you a virtual hug. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peggy. I'll talk to you later this week.
Okay, thanks,
Bye.
Brad.
You're welcome.
Bye, Heather. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.